Hello, and welcome to a very windy Denmark, where I'm going to take you through the brand new Mercedes CLA. I'm Jordan, and you're watching Auto Express. Okay, you're probably thinking to yourself, yes, you've already done a video on one of these cars. Well, finally, we've driven it, and we can actually quantify those claims about that wild 484-mile peak range. So, before we get into that, let's have a quick talk about the design, because here, on the road rather than in a studio, it does look quite different. First of all, yes, the stars are still here. The rest of the car you can see here is in this quite striking looking blue color. We've got some 18-inch wheels on this car. A lot of people will say it does kind of look like the old CLA, and that is probably no bad thing. But if you really pay attention, there is quite a few differences in terms of its stature. Now, it does look quite wide here on camera, but in the flesh, it looks a little bit narrow and a little bit weedy. Now let's move to the back, where we can see we've got a sort of sleek fastback style roofline and a single rear light bar, which is new. Now, the car that we're going to be talking about here is the CLA 250 Plus, because that really is the fun one in terms of those big numbers. But what do you think? I think it's probably a little bit awkward looking, but hey, you're going to have your own opinion. Let's go have a quick look inside. You can see this guy here is finished in a rather fetching white and black interior. It's actually quite nice with the blue, I'm going to say. However, generally speaking, everything in here is, like before in the studio, quite simple. First things first, the driving position is actually quite different to the last car. You feel like you're sat a little bit higher and also a little bit closer to the steering wheel somehow, and I think that's because of the batteries under the floor. While the steering wheel does look very similar to the steering wheels that come on pretty much all Mercedes, it's worthwhile knowing that the new MBUX system, which we'll go into in a little bit, is actually much easier to use and has much more simplified controls on the steering wheel. They are much better than they were before, and that's a great thing. Space-wise, I'm currently sat in the back, and as you can see, there is pretty good legroom behind my driving position, although I am quite short. This, however, is more typical, and you can still see there's relatively good space. There's a mostly flat floor, and it is actually a lot more spacious back here than in the previous CLA, and that is helped by the optional glass roof that you can see here. Just a quick one whilst I have you. Did you actually know that you can buy and sell your car at autoexpress.co.uk? Now, if that's something that you want to do, make sure you click the link in the description below and we'll run you through the process. Okay, behind the wheel of the new CLA, and let's give you a really quick rundown of what this screen is like to use actually on the move, and because it's really very good. And now, it does help that there is a very large screen here, and that is essential for the way that Mercedes-Benz sets its main screen out, because everything is on what they call a single layer. So if you want to go somewhere in the sat-nav, let's go back to our sort of HQ, you can see super easy, it's right there. If you want to start playing around with the music, it sits right there on the homepage. You want to start to call someone, it's right there on the homepage. It is all very easy to use and very functional. It also has the climate control system that sits here in the bottom. That looks a little bit fiddly, and it can be quite tricky to use when you're on the move, especially if you want to sort of get into the detailed elements of the climate control. But inherently, the voice command on this, and I know this sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but the voice command is pretty good. If you want to get more detailed in terms of each of the car's components, then obviously there is this main menu screen. What's also nice is that the 10.25-inch display here in front of the driver is also super simple, very easy to use. You can see here the AMG line comes with these sort of red dials. You could also flip between an assisted view, and if you flick up, you can then also get a map view. Some other things that I don't like straight away. We have this line of buttons here. They are just a little bit too far for my arms, and the volume tapper thing doesn't really work as well as a knob. We also have instant access to the parking camera. That does work quite well, and the camera system and the parking system itself works great. Storage, we've got good door bin storage. There's a bit of space there for a bottle. We've got a nice pair of cup holders here in the center console, wireless phone charging, some space underneath as well, which is very handy with a little strap, and then a center console, which here is absolutely rammed full of stuff. Also, the gear selector wand, which is here, which is pretty normal, now acts in a slightly different way. So you just, when you get in, you literally just start the car by putting it into drive or reverse. That's quite handy, but also you control your regen through here as well. So you push back and forward. That is actually quite intuitive, and you can also swap between sort of plus, minus, which gives you more or less regenerative brakes, and it's very quick and easy to flick to an automatic mode, which I don't personally like using, but Mercedes knows its customers do. The most important thing, does this car do its 484 miles? Let's have a look. So this car is a 350, but the car I've been driving all day is a 250 Plus, which is the car that is going to be the most important one for the UK market. With that, you get the big 85 kilowatt hour battery and also a single motor with 272 horsepower, which is mounted on the rear axle, which makes this rear-wheel drive, kind of like a C-Class, and unlike the last CLA. But crucially, let's talk about the range. So I've been driving this car for the best part of 4.5 hours here in Denmark. It's been a mixture of sort of motorways, A roads, B roads, and here in the capital in Copenhagen as well. So what are my numbers? Well, I got an average of 4.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which is incredibly impressive. Now, of course, if you extrapolate that up based on the battery size, the usable battery size, we end up at a range of about 408 miles from a charge. Now, that doesn't sound particularly great in comparison to the 484 that it quotes. However, it's worth mentioning that in percentage terms, it's really very close. And also, day to day, you're not really going to be wanting to do more than 400 miles on a charge anyway without wanting to go out for a stretch. So, all things considered, very impressive. But what's it actually like to drive? Well, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because this car feels a lot more grown up than the old one. It rides a lot better, it's much more refined, and it is much easier to drive as well, mostly on account of the fact that the steering is super light, the throttle and the brake is way better than any EV that Mercedes has done before, and it really does drive like the next generation. Is it fun to drive? No. Does it matter? No. That's going to be the job of the AMG model. Instead, this feels like it's going to be a really great car to just sort of sit on motorways and do quite long, big mileage. Look, I don't particularly like the way this car looks. I don't necessarily think it looks like a step-on, but trust me when I say it definitely feels like it to drive. And as an ownership experience, because of that long range and because of the nice interior and because of the way that the UI works, this is going to be a pretty impressive car for Mercedes-Benz. And I think it's going to be just as popular as those previous CLAs, which have been phenomenally successful. Do I love the new CLA? Not really. Do I think it's incredibly impressive? Yes. This is a big step on, and do you know what, if this really works for you, if the shape, if the styling, if the interior, if the tech, if all of that is right up your street and you're just after a really capable, really quiet, comfortable, refined EV with a great range, this does it better than just about anything else. That extra bit of X factor, that wow factor, is probably what's keeping it from a full 5 stars, but it definitely has earned the 4.5 that the 250 Plus is going to get.